Hello and welcome to a live episode of Elden Kings. And if you're watching later on, then welcome to the recording we made for posterity. This live recording, the content matter will be first impressions and ideas and speculation about Shadows of the Erdtree, the utmost, the long-awaited DLC finally released. Joining me for this fantastic and very exciting episode is the one and only Saint Trina. Welcome to the podcast, Saint Trina. It's been a while.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be back. It's good to see you. It's really nice to see you.
It's really good to see you too. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's been so exciting. I mean, like everyone was just so amped up
yeah,
for Shadows of the Erdtree, and it's finally out. It's finally here. Everyone's playing it. There's messages everywhere. The online's super active. How's it been for
yeah.
you? I imagine.
It's been so fun. It's been like like the dance of even us before this conversation of like trying to tell each other hints on how to get to good stuff, but without like ruining the surprise of those good things. Is like a very fun process. Or it's like, your friends are like everybody's helping each other figure it out together. So it's like a little bit of a shame that they showed so much of the game beforehand. But everybody's been kind of doing good with the honor system, I would say.
Yeah, I get the marketing decision behind, giving people gameplay reveals, giving press releases for
Yeah,
like, but like I don't know. I'm one of those people who personally would so much rather just wait the extra week rather than, give away those first precious hours of like impressions to someone else. But I
right.
totally get people that do. I mean, it's a balance of how you prefer to interact with the media.
The fact that they just like showed the reveal of Skadu Altus is like, oh, it's a bit hard of a pill to swallow. That's all.
A little bit. I
Yeah,
have to agree.
it stings.
I would love to show off more of the terrain, but unfortunately, this is about as much as my graphics card can handle for the YouTube release.
Oh, right, because you're also running recording software and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay, got you. Yeah,
But
well, that's fine. We don't. That way, it's even less spoilery.
exactly. So sit back, enjoy, and get ready for some real interesting details. I guess just to explain how we'll go through this, I think that we'll start with the general impressions of the DLC. We'll try to dance around some of the more major spoilers. The general content of what we'll discuss is stuff that's from the first two remembrances and a bit after once you reach Scadu Altus. And once we feel satisfied with that discussion, we'll dig deeper, we'll get into the more speculative, whatever side of things. Uh,
Ooh.
so I guess I just want to know, what did you think of your first, hour or two in Shadow of the Erdtree? Like, what did you think of the Wickerman that's just immediately there? Did you try did you try to fight
Mm.
it? I did.
Yes, I did try to fight it, and I really appreciated that. It's really like it's finally like a fight that feels designed first and foremost for Torrent. You know, because he's got those extra large stomps, so to speak, and you can jump them too. So I guess it's designed well for jumping as well.
Yeah.
So I really like them. However, in the same vein that we were just speaking, I didn't spend much time on him because we had already seen him. We'd already seen him a bunch in the promo material, so I was like, all right, I'm trying to go get the good shot stuff.
Yeah, literally.
So my first, like, literal first hours were like obviously stunned by the visuals. Um, but we've already seen it too, so I was kind of like rushing the beginning. But it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just like I was ravenous, you know?
You had to
And
know more.
yeah, and I was streaming, and I streamed for like an insane amount of hours. I just kept going.
So
I
where did
think it
you
was
rush
only like
to?
nine
What
hours.
was what was the first destination?
Yeah, I went straight to the right. So I went to the Church of Consolation first. and just
Oh,
like, it's kind of like a little bit of a nothing area, but it was really nice to get my feet wet over there actually. Um,
okay.
just because it's really simple. It's just got the little Celtic knights
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of items, and then I moved
Yeah.
on to obviously the furnace boy, and over to the left there's like those grave birds,
Mm-hmm.
where you get your first glimpse of the wormy boys, who are very good boys.
They are
And
such good boys.
yeah, I think these birds are pretty much gonna say it all by the end.
The
Um,
golem birds that are made to represent
yeah,
the Deathrite birds.
yeah, and they were made even before the Deathrite birds, it would seem.
Oh, what
I
makes
can't
you
remember.
think that? I'm
Yeah,
curious.
there's an item that says it.
Okay.
I'll have to go looking for it if we want to find it in
Mm-hmm.
the more lore heavy section.
Yeah.
But regardless, just the symbolism alone, the fact that it's like a death bird and it also has golem stuff is like that. The golems are like the part of the world that wasn't really explained very much, and the Deathrite birds have tons of exposition. So it's like combining those two means like big answers are coming.
Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many lines of speculation to go down, but even just the
Hmm.
the beginning idea of connecting the golems, who we know to be prehistorical from their
Right.
association with Farum Azula, and that
Yep.
the idea that they've been like co-opted. We see the watchdogs made by the Erdtree Order are like lesser versions of them. We see the Crystallians, their creator, their sculptors gone,
Yep.
and connecting that to the Deathrite birds, which is another prehistorical aspect of the game. Like, you really see how Shadow of the Erdtree digs into the actual specifics of the prehistory, which have been uh, previously obscured in the base game of Elden Ring.
Hmm. Absolutely. I've had this running thing in my head of like, okay, so we've all talked about the base game lore a shitload at this point. But one thing that people don't really bring up all that often is like the fact that Marika is a clay husk at the end of Elden Ring. I think the fact that she looks like she might be made of stone. But I get to me it gives me the impression of clay, which is like one of those classic like human history symbols. Um, so I think there might be more to say in terms of her being a golem. But like
Interesting.
I don't really know where that's going. Like I had another lore friend a while back, Cosmo, who was theorizing that Radagon was a silver tier, and they had a lot of good evidence for that. One of those evidences fell out, but there was still lots of other supporting evidence for his reason for believing that. And
Yeah.
so I'm just really that's like the one thing in the lore that like I really haven't found anything except for the beginning of this thread, and I'm really excited to see if there's like a couple more bits at the end of this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they are such good boys. Young Book Chin.
The best
Yeah.
of boys.
Yeah. I really like the birds. And they're not like the most annoying enemy in the game sometimes. And I would say this in a good way. A lot of the like soldier NPCs feel like fighting like a literal PvP opponent.
They're very
That's pretty
aggressive and
impressive.
they zone you out in a way that the base game soldiers don't have the full capacity of, which I'm impressed
Yes.
by.
Yes. I don't know what they I mean, it's like I think doing that with the AI, whatever they however they decided to code it, has its own downsides, but holy cow, did it overcome certain things about like uh enemy patterns that they've been kind of in a rut with.
hmm
In a rut is maybe a strong word, but you
Now,
know
of
what I
course,
mean. Like
there's
we've fought.
already. Did you know that the reviews of Shadows of the Erdtree are currently at mixed on Steam, despite it being like higher
Aw,
rated on Metacritic than like the Witcher DLC or some of the other like highest rated DLCs ever. And it's probably rated that way for two major reasons. The first, performance, everyone's computers are falling off. But then the other one is
right.
difficulty. Like it's that exact aggressive AI that
Oh,
you're lauding that I also would laud. I love the aggressive AI. I think
it's
it's such a
really
perfect.
cool.
Yeah, it's so good. It's a perfect evolution of what already exists. And
Yeah.
it's just people hate it. People think it's too hard. It's.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that. We can get into like some of the bosses. I'll say are pretty insane that I've ran into only very, very recently. And I'm playing on New Game Plus 6, y'all, so
She's a mad
everybody kind of
woman.
has all it's surprisingly similar to just playing it any other playthrough, but the main thing is like the health pool. But the resistances are not crazy, which is so thank God for that.
Because
Like
they get really crazy on NG6 and 7 in the base game, if I remember correctly. Like,
they do.
Godfrey is a tank on NG7.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He's like, "Oh, that's a little toothpick you just hit me with."
That
He does
tickles.
not care. Yeah, so this one does not have that same effect, but they do have the big health pools, and your power is limited by the skadoosh tree. So,
Yeah.
so it ends up being pretty hard. And I've been using like all of my dirtiest tricks, which is fun though, because then I get to use all my dirtiest tricks. I'm
Finally
using
having
like
opponents that justify them.
right. I go mimic. I use moss clumps. If you guys don't know about moss clumps, I am here to give you the gospel of moss clumps. They are so good for applying poison safely against really aggressive bosses and then just like backing off and wailing them with uh what's the death blade? The one that lets you do the L2 where you jump up in the air and hit them with death and death from
Oh,
afar.
Malekith's Black Blade.
Not Malekith's Black Blade, but the dagger version.
Oh, the Black Knife Dagger.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, I have
So
that one on my character too, actually.
yeah. So if you're using all of those, that's like every dirty trick I could think of. Besides like rot breath incantation.
It's beautiful though. I mean, it's fun to have that justification for
Yeah,
fighting someone.
yeah, it's really nice. It's been
Mm-hmm.
really fun like going all out for this DLC.
Okay, so let's get into some narrative first impressions. I've got a whole
Mm-hmm.
list of things I could talk about, but to begin with, what do you think of the prefix scadu or shadow? I mean, if you want to pronounce the SC as like a sh sound,
Right.
you know, it.
Uh I think there's a lot of, twinning going on, obviously. And I think it's very appropriate to call it the Skadu tree, because of what I think it is narratively. I think it's the roots of the Erdtree growing out the other side of the world.
As
And
above,
that,
so below.
yeah, and there's a lot of reasons why I believe that. It's kind of like its own rant, which I have done on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I think it's an appropriate name. However, I will say there's like so much twinning that I feel like I've literally read some of these item descriptions before. And
Oh, what item
uh
descriptions like bring that to mind? I'm curious.
okay, yeah, give me 1 second. Let me try and actually find one real quick.
Okay. Cause yeah, I was scadu. If you look up the like etymology of other words, scadu means to diminish in Latin, which is interesting because there's already a lot of Latin inspiration on Elden Ring, but also there's also like Celtic inspiration, and scath is shadow in Celtic. There's
Yes,
actually
I
like a
think it's
hero
coming
named
from that.
Scathach, whose like name is Shadow or something.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's coming from the shadow stuff, and I would say that I think there's a lot of pagan stuff shining through because we're going to America's origin, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what they've said multiple times in the trailers and whatnot.
This is the first
And
land she stepped foot in, apparently.
right, right, exactly. So if you think of her as like a Jesus figure, which I think that's very fair to say, even though
Absolutely.
she does Yeah, she's like a very mired in conflict Jesus character, but a Jesus character nonetheless for her symbolism's sake.
Mm-hmm.
But if you reverse that clock by like 1,000 years or so, uh, in Elden Ring time, you would arrive at paganism as far as like because this game follows pretty similar spiritual developments to our own world in terms of order. So if it happens chronologically in our spiritual development of like uh basically just like all of the the continent of Europe, so I'm counting Asia and stuff. Uh that's gonna chronologically line up with the ages of Elden Ring ish. And
Ish.
yeah, ish. And so, yeah, exactly. So there's like a society maybe that came before America because it does seem like she was a part of a society first. Um, and I have a reason for believing that I will not be mentioning to you on purpose.
Ooh.
Um, but yeah, so that's how it lines up, and so you would expect this place that's about her origin to have like extra pagan Celtic influence, is basically what I'm trying to get at. And we have seen that, and I believe that even like the Mesmer soldiers, their little tunics and their use of battle axes seems Celtic coded to me.
I can see it. It also has a bit of Godfrey in him, who is also Celtic, with his own
Yes.
kilt and
Yes.
battle axe.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I believe that because he is to me he's like a he is the All-Father character that eventually becomes the Judean and Christian monodeity. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's like an amalgamation of lots of storm gods that came before him, namely Yahweh. If you've done any research on Yahweh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's like the guy who got co-opted into the Jewish Udhe or God.
Because Yahweh was from the Canaanite religion first around Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a smaller religion in the overall scheme of like what was popular at the time. It's funny.
Yeah. No, it's interesting how that intercultural stuff works out.
Yeah.
I think that I mean you said that you wanted to keep some of the secrets to your chest because I'm sure that there's more to be found, especially, since you're a bit ahead of me in terms of map exploration, but
Mm-hmm.
even from what we know already of the sort of paganism of Elden Ring, we know in the base game that the Golden Order's rise to power is very much a monotheism rising out of polytheism, very similarly
Yep.
to how the actual developments of, Christianity in the real world wins, which is very interesting. So
Could not have
it's
said it
just,
better.
yeah, I am so glad that we're on the same page because
Yeah.
it's so fascinating. It's like I was saying before, just so much of the prehistory is being specified now, and I think you really see that in the first major dungeon of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, which is Bellarat, the tower. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
which it showcases all of that. I won't go into specifics about it because it's one of those things again. If you're listening to this because you want impressions, then go play it. It's incredible. We'll talk more about the lore
Yeah.
later though,
Uh-huh.
Shay.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that comes to mind, because I really do like the as above, so below idea, like we have this
Mm-hmm.
land of shadow, this land mired in death. I pulled up the item description of the Gravebird armor earlier when we were talking about it, and what it reads is Gravebirds are ancient golems, created to guard the spirit graves, built where all manners of death ultimately drift. And death is
Yes.
capitalized. Like the land of shadow is the land of shadow because this is where death drifts to. In that way it becomes an afterlife, like how people have been speculating, but it's an afterlife that was turned into an afterlife. It wasn't always the land of shadow, which is there's already nuance there, isn't
Yeah.
it? Isn't it fascinating?
Yeah. It's like was yeah, that's really strange cuz like did they I don't know how that works.
I have
Unless
another
if it
item
was just
description, but maybe that would be spoilery to bring up so soon.
okay, okay, okay. We'll save it. We'll save
We'll
it.
save it.
I'm trying
Um,
to find one item that I really want to show you later. But yeah, keep going.
okay.
Sorry.
One other thing I think is interesting, just because I think examining the Land of Shadow as a concept is free game for now. But this
Yeah.
monument reads, "The very center of the lands between, all manners of death wash up here, only to be suppressed." People have been theorizing that the Land of Shadow might be that, spot in the middle of the lands between, and I feel like this
Yes.
pillar here is really trying to say that. I mean, of
That's
course,
I think so.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like Farah Missoula is the flusher.
What do you
If,
mean by
if
flusher? What is?
if okay, so let's back up slightly.
Okay,
So
okay.
imagine this is Sheol and or the like underside of Yggdrasil,
And
right?
Sheol
Yggdrasil.
is the Jewish afterlife for sinners.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
it's sort of the inspiration for hell in a way.
Yeah, sort of. It's not I wouldn't say it's nearly as like evil and negative. It's just like, okay, you're not done yet. Your soul hasn't purified all the way. It's not quite as like, oh, you messed up in life and so you get shunted off to Sheol. It's just kind of like a thing your soul does until
Yeah,
it's
it's
ready.
less like damnation and more like
Right.
purgatory.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's similar to like reincarnation. I wouldn't call it reincarnation. I think that's a bit strong.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is a different concept, but it's like your soul gets put into like a new vessel until it's ready to rejoin God.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, and then but it sinks. Specifically, it sinks. So that's why I like Sheol imagery wise because I think it's very similar to what you were just describing.
Okay. Because yeah,
Um,
you sink down, and if you look at the story
right.
trailer for Shadow of the Erdtree, when it describes Mikola coming to the Land of Shadow and abandoning what he had before, it explicitly shows him sinking into the depths of
Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's like all black and stuff behind
Mm-hmm.
Saint Trina. Um, so yeah, so if we are imagining that's like the cosmology they're going with, and then we make a secondary leap, which is it is a leap, but it's one that people have posited many times, like the other one we were just talking about, that Fair Missoula was also in the center of the lands between,
Mm-hmm.
then Fair Missoula would be the funnel where time sucks you into the land of shadow to be Sheolified. Like imagine there's no such thing as Erdtree burial, where you're like getting reincorporated through the lands between, and your soul can actually sink to the lowest depths. That would be where they all get sucked
And we do
because
see a
there's
very
that big
explicit.
storm.
Okay. I like that line of reasoning. I'm not sure, like, it's one of those things that goes far enough into speculation where, like, I feel like some of my mind is undecided, but I love the
Right,
symbolism of it, the heart of
right.
it, and it resonates with, like, the evidence of a death cult that we have from Farum Azula, the fact that the beast
Hmm.
clergymen ritually sacrifice themselves on pillars, the fact that the surviving beast clergyman Geraint wears a kang, like a necklace symbolizing penance of that's shaped like destined death. There's
Hmm.
other statues of beast clergymen in Farum Azula that have these same necklaces, so it's not something he's taken on in recent years because of his like guardianship of it under the Golden Order. It's something he retains from his time as a beast clergyman, and we see death root, we see ancient death
Mm.
root, not spread by. Personally, I think it's not spread by Godwin because Farum Azula is disconnected
I
from the
agree.
landmass.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ancient Deathroot, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Spe- yeah. Okay, I was about to say a spoiler thing, and then I was like, ah.
Okay. Because let's get back to first impressions so we can get our
Okay,
teeth into the spoilers sooner
yeah.
then. So,
Okay.
what do you think of the verticality of the Land of Shadow? I think it's sort of incredibly designed. There's so many times where I go over something and then I come back and I go under it, or I
Yep.
jump down cliffs to get to a new area, or this. It's just an incredible sense of verticality, of backtracking without backtracking, and just general exploration, in my opinion.
I feel always lost in the land of shadow, which is like an insanely cool effect. I think that at least partially it's on purpose, you know. They want you to just kind of like accept the fact that you don't quite know where you're going, but that like the path in front of you is probably where you need to go because there's still roads and like, you know, valleys, so to speak, and you can just kind of like follow those. Uh, but I'm just constantly like losing track of where I was and then realizing like, oh shit, there's a whole new zone over here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it becomes like a really nice discovery aspect. It's really a good feeling there. I would say.
The sense of discoveries, it's just incredible. Um,
Uh,
yeah. I
yeah. What about you?
I love it. I love discovering all of the mini dungeons. I think the mini dungeons are like they're longer than the base game ones in a way that feels very well designed,
Mm,
very impactful. Like you spend much more time going through a mini dungeon, I feel like. It's more of an
yes,
investment.
yes. And I did like that some of them didn't have a boss at the end. Actually, I was like
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh, nice. I don't feel like I had to slog through this.
I know
So
the
like
Star
the impact is just
Forge.
different.
Yeah. Because there's the ruined forge, and that just has you finding an item at the like solving the area puzzle, like to get through
Yeah.
it, and that's
So
really
there's
cool.
Yeah, there's multiple forges like that that you'll encounter.
Okay. Do you know
Hmm
any other mini dungeon types that follow that pattern, or is it just the ruined forges that you're referencing?
I think it's just the forges. I've only done like two, maybe a third one that I'm forgetting, but I think I've
Mm-hmm.
only really done two so far.
Yeah.
So I think it's just those ones. But
Okay.
they're all really gorgeous. Like, um, it reminds me of like the final couple dungeons. Like people kind of poo poo like the yellow annex dungeon and stuff because it's part of consecrated snowfields in the base game.
Mm-hmm.
And consecrated snowfield's a bit of a letdown, not gonna lie. Uh, however, those were so gorgeous because they had like this ambiance and like this mystery of like the fact that there's actually ice and stuff growing over everything. So they've done like a similar motif here with all the big pots and all the weird levers and stuff. So it hits the weird marker for me much nicer than
Yeah.
the base game. Just kind of like endless Draugr fodder, if you will.
Yeah, it is a bit, for lack of a better word, Skyrimified with the
Yeah.
amount of dungeons. I think that I appreciate what they were trying for and the way that they iterate on the dungeons and the way that they use the quantity of dungeons to flesh out the concept of a region. But it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely one of those things where I guess you can see the Land of Shadow as such a more streamlined area, and it's more compact, and in that more compact way you don't have to have that quantity of dungeons and you can
Yep.
instead focus on quality.
They can not overstay their welcome, finally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Flashbacks to me hating on Bloodborne's chalices.
Those are something else. I still haven't beaten Queen Yarnum in that game. Every time
Yeah.
I try, I get really burnt out once you start getting to the part of the dungeons where you have to go looking real hard for the crafting materials because you could miss a chest in one of the randomly generated layouts. That's really important, actually. And
Yep.
oh boy, yeah, it's a bit of a
Yeah.
mess.
I always burn out. I always burn out.
So, okay. About the narrative of the Land of Shadow, I think it's just honestly, I think it's so fascinating because one of the things that really wows me besides the level design is the narrative design, the structure and way that a like first showcases its characters and continues to develop them. In Elden Ring, in my opinion, you get a much more Dark Souls style NPC approach where there are occasionally people that you really do have like emotional resonances with. I think Roger, Fia, Dee, all of these characters that have actual Mending Rune quest lines, they have the narrative. You know, EG has some of the most dialogue in the game. Like Rani's general little squad does in general, but like
Right.
there's other characters, you know, like people don't really like Hayeda that much, or her banished knight father Edgar, because they're just, you know, they're like, oh, they just randomly die, you know, like Yera dies,
Hmm.
everyone dies, and people sort of don't like that. At least they don't like the abruptness of it. So looking the shadow of the Erdtree, I think you see a much more like Sekiro-esque design. You know, like you
Mm.
have Leda the Needle, the captain of the knights, who is very holy, very divine. She's very you know, like religious. You've got Troile the poisoner. He's a perfumer. At
Love
least
him.
he looks like he studied with the perfumers. I love him too. He's so cute. And he's sort of like he looks aimless. You know, he's similar to Roger in that way. You've got Freya the Redmane, who just radiates strength, and not just strength, but like not just strength of arms, but strength of character, like
Hmm.
integrity. You know, you've got Hornsent, who just he's vengeful, he's angry. Even when you help him, he doesn't like you. Uh, yeah. Um, I don't know. I think these characters are really well designed, and they resonate in ways that make you immediately interested in them. In a way that I feel like is more Sekiro-esque than previous Elden Ring or Dark Souls designs. How
Okay,
much of that do you agree
absolutely.
with?
No, yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't really thought of it. I hadn't really given them enough credit. But now I'm thinking of like Maria and the fact that she has such varied motivations. And yeah, I would say, uh, especially in the motivation for them moving around the world, they have a lot more going on, right? They're under the spell of Mikola, and but even within that spell, they all have their own very different objectives. Um,
Yeah.
so they give me like very dysfunctional vibes in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like literally the only reason they're working together is because Mikola made them.
Right, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think that creates a really fun tension. The one thing I would say is I wish they would have talked like a little bit more so far, but like I'm not that far. There's a good chunk left, I think.
Yeah.
So I think they are
Yeah.
about to talk a lot more. Um, I thought Freya was really interesting, especially because of like her voice and demeanor are so similar to who's Lucy Liu, Horlu's daughter.
Oh,
Uh,
Nephililu.
yeah, Nefeli. She reminded me so much of Nefeli, but she's got like this. I don't know what culturally her armor is supposed to be, but it gives me Chinese vibes.
I got a little bit of
Um,
Latin vibes as well with like the
okay.
mask.
Okay, yeah, I would have to do like a closer deep dive on her, but I'm just really interested to see how she works in culturally with the other characters because she's wearing gold. So I'm like,
True.
what does that mean?
Because she
What does that mean?
describes herself as a red main. So whatever
Right.
golden armor she earned was probably earned during the late Golden Order era or, you know, Shattering War era.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No, I like them. I think they're really well thought out, and I think that Roderica was like the good news of what's to come for From Software character development for their actual
Yeah.
like the progression of characters. I mean specifically because they've always
Mm-hmm.
had good characters, so to say, but not always like we don't always get to see their growth firsthand. And I think the Tarnished compatriots are like their chance to do that because they can't really do it as well with a boss. You can't be like hanging out with Melania before you get to Melania.
No. And even Mesmer, who seems like he's gone through a decent chunk of inner turmoil, will probably be dead by the time you get his remembrance and learn the most that you can about
Right.
him. Yeah.
Right. Like what'll he get? 10 lines, maybe, if you like die in multiple different ways to him.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that the NPCs are the best way to not only illustrate a reflection of the character's journey, but also to show different developments in the world itself. And I'll be
Yes.
very interested to see how the NPCs are used for that going forward.
Yes. I do have one more thing to say right in that vein, actually.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Um, in the base game, there was a lot of tarnished that I felt were supposed to be echoes of the themes being presented by one of the demigods or one of the actual gods.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I thought that was a great motif, but there was a bunch that got left on the table
Mm-hmm.
that didn't end up getting their own tie-in character, so to speak. So I think that the red main chick is maybe supposed to be filling in that gap for Radon, for example.
Yeah.
And then in that same vein, I'm like, oh, sick. We can like give everybody a counterpart now, which is really cool. And I'm interested to see like what I come up with as far as like who I think is trying to express what themes at the end.
I'm also interested in where they'll go because I mean, of course, we
Yeah.
have an unmentioned NPC so far is Ansbach, who is a devotee of the Lord of Moog, the Blood Lord. So that he's already filling out
Mm,
Moog in your model of things. So
we should definitely remember to talk about him in the lore section.
yes, absolutely. So let's move on with the preliminary stuff then. Another part of
Mm-hmm.
the narrative I really like is the Miquella's runes, because I think they function the same way as the sword monuments you find in the base game. They give context to where you are, what has happened here. In the base game, that context is the Shattering War, but again, in the much more personal telling of the Shadow of the Erdtree, this is Miquella's story, and you even have this idea of the Miquella's runes you're supposed to see, the ones that what's his name, Hornseer or whatever, Hornsense. He gives you
Mm-hmm.
maps to go to them. He tells you if you go to the other ones, he'll kill you or something. He tells you not to stray from the path.
Oh, I missed that one. Oh, cool.
Yeah, because when you do stray from the path, the first place you do that is the Cerulean coast. You begin to
Mm.
see Miquella's runes that have text that is really, really interesting. Again, waiting for the spoiler
Mm-hmm.
section, but you go from the main line, the ones that you're expected to follow, talking about how he's atoning for his sin, he's giving up his flesh, but you go to the optional ones, and they're talking about a much more personal journey he's undergoing, and it makes you
Yes,
wonder if this is even worthwhile to do, you know?
absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Okay, okay. What other impressions do you have? What is on the mind
Okay.
that's not spoilery that
Yes.
you wanna like? I know that you had a performance thing that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So, I'm playing on the PS5, and I'm playing through an Elgato and an OBS. So, there are some slight caveats I have to say about the coloration of the game. In that, like, I think part of my issue is that I'm going through the OBS, and it's so basically what's happening to me is when I go into certain sections, the lighting is like completely broken, and it's all black and blue, and it's all black and blue, and you just can't really see where you're going until you like whip out a torch, and then even then you can only see like 10 feet ahead of you. And so I'm kind of playing through uh like a flash cave in a Pokemon game without flash.
Oh
It's
no.
yeah. Uh, and I just like muscled through it because like I want to consume this content like as fast as possible. Like I said, I'm actually absolutely ravenous for this stuff. Um, but that was definitely annoying. Um, and beyond that, they do this chromatic aberration. Uh, and think you can turn it off on the PC. I'm pretty sure I have it turned off on the PC, but basically what that does is it like tries to make things look like they're on a camera, and then if they're in your peripheral, they like turn red and green. It kind of looks like a 3D effect from like a hokey 3D movie, but it's not the same thing. But the real reason I'm mentioning it, it's not that annoying in the base game, but when you go into the plains with all the graves, for me at least, they all just look like completely random colors. They all look like super green, super red, super blue, and it's just like awful.
Oh my god, that does sound awful.
Yeah. So that's like, between the dark sections and the plains with graves, makes up a very large chunk of like the total area that I'm playing on. So I was like really disappointed. I hope
Yeah, that does
I hope
sound
they improve it for the
disappointing.
PS5. Like I'm assuming like half of it is because it kind of looks discolored in the first place, right? I think the discolored in the first place is my OBS slash Elgato, one of the two culprits.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest I think is the PS5 version's problem, and I really hope they get their act together on that.
Yeah, I do too. That sounds difficult to
Yeah, so
handle.
if you're on PS5 and you're having similar issues, I'd love to hear about it because I don't know what is going on. It sucks.
We'll have to troubleshoot it together.
Yeah, but other than that, I think it's great. The game is absolutely phenomenal. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing on first impressions I'll say is I love that I found like three new types of trees. They didn't like just stick with a bunch of little mini illusory Erdtrees that they've done in the past. There's like lots of little special trees
Mm-hmm.
that all kind of mean their own thing, and they all have their own little storytelling on them. Like the one I'm looking at right now has people hung on it, but then like later on, this tree is kind of like a positive symbol, so it like brings new context to the one with the hanged people, because it's like
Yeah. Like, do you
it's an
think that
abomination now.
yeah, like the tree? I assume you meaning like the spiral sort of weeping willow tree, or
Yes, and I'm thinking of those as like root trees. I think they're hinting at the fact that the skidoo tree is like literally just roots growing the other way.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that's what comes to bear. Because some of my other theories have been coming up Millhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I've been kind of like screaming at my girlfriend, being like, "We're in Vindication City, baby!" Like as I've gotten through some of the later lore stuff, I've been like, "Oh my God, it's exactly what we thought it would be."
I was feeling the exact same way, actually.
Yeah, yeah. The deep lore honeys are eating. We're all eating.
We
For real.
are. And like even outside of the speculation around like the twisted helix willow, there's this, like you see it so prevalent in Ballarat, that pagan influenced city that we spoke about before. So to see it
Mm-hmm.
in its negative context with the people hanging from it, you see such a rich story
Mm-hmm.
about Mesmer's genocide, and it is such good
Mm-hmm.
storytelling.
And just like we said earlier, it ties in perfectly with, the eradication of polytheism that the waves of Judaism and then later on Christianity took to kind of solidify their position
Yeah.
in their respective cultures.
Okay. So, with impressions wrapping up, let us
Mm-hmm.
make our spoiler announcement. If you want to play through blind, if you want to play through without knowing specifics, maybe take a break here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just want to ask you, what did you think of Rellana, um, the second Remembrance boss?
Oh my God, he's so cool. Or she was so cool. I
Mm-hmm.
was I was definitely skeptical when I heard the word Rellana. I was like, you guys, we've done so many of these like mirror names. Like it's good. It's good. We've done that, and I thought it was definitely gonna be like the carrion homie that we meet later on.
I
I
think a
thought
lot of
that was
people
gonna be
assumed.
Rellana.
Yeah.
But I was really glad when it was Renala's sister. And I definitely want to talk about that description because I think it's extremely important. But I want to hear your first take first.
Just her fight has been the most fun I've had with this DLC so far. Like every
Yeah.
fight I've had has gone by in around like 20 to 30 minutes top, usually not even getting to that. Like the 20 to 30 minutes was the other two remembrance bosses that I
Yeah.
fought. But Rellana, I was at SCAD, I think I had like level 5 on my fragment, and I knew I was scaled enough to have a fun fight against her. So I tried her for like an hour straight. It was so fun. It
Mm-hmm.
was just
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. She's such a cinematic boss. She's so gorgeous in her moveset. It's the perfect love child of Pontiff Sullivan and Melania, with all of the speed and aggression and flashiness and cool effects, but none of the overbearing impossibility of what Melania feels like. There's never a time that Rellana takes me from full health to zero in a way that I feel like, damn, that was almost unavoidable for my position where my
Right.
positioning was.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that comes down to in the base game, there's a lot of moves that the bosses do that will stun you, and then the follow-up will is also like at the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
So they like, and then they end up stunning you like too long for,
The
and then the
Putrescent
second one just,
Knight, the other
yeah.
Remembrance boss, literally does that with a lot of its combos.
Yeah, the Putrescence Knight is kind of interesting. I don't know about that one.
Yeah, they were cooking.
They were definitely cooking. They were cooking with this whole DLC. There's a lot of bosses where I'm like, "Hoi!"
I think
But
the
no.
demi-human swordmaster Ans was a good introduction into that. That guy sort of kicked my ass at
Oh.
first if you
Oh,
fought
I didn't
him.
fight that one. I didn't fight that one. That's sick. I'm looking forward to
Okay.
that. Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into this description real quick because I think there's a lot to say. I'll just read it out for us.
Mm-hmm.
Remembrance of the Twin Moon Night. Remembrance of Rellana, the Twin Moon Night, hewn into the skidoo tree. Uh, the power. Oh wait, right. Once a Carian princess, Rellana disavowed her birthright and chose to stand at Mesmer's side instead, knowing full well that not even the brilliance of the moon could grant him succor. Before long, she became known as the Sword of Mesmer. Okay, I forgot. This is what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Uh I've literally read these words before, you know? It's like literally the Sword of Mikla. It's like they're a direct mirror of Mikla and Melania here in the way that they're wording this.
Yeah, the blade of Mesmer, the blade of Marika, the
Right.
blade of Mikola. You
Yeah.
like, is Mesmer an Empyrean? Like he might be, which is
I mean,
so
he definitely could be.
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think easily because like those are the main candidates, right? Children of America.
Mm-hmm. And like we hear about the seduction and the betrayal. If the seduction was of a god, then two
Mm-hmm.
Empyreans, the child of is another Empyrean. It's
Mm-hmm.
very fascinating to consider.
Mm-hmm. So then the other thing I wanted to mention is the fact that she disavowed her birthright. Not being a princess, but instead being a knight. These are like traditionally very gendered terms, right? And there's like a big prevalence of this motif happening in the main game of somebody being born into one cast or one role, and then they reject that role and go for a new one. And usually that new one is like quote unquote of the opposite gender, so to speak. And I thought it was really cool to see that reaffirmed here in one of like the most important characters in the game. Like before we had like Dolores in the base game, who's like a woman who decides to be a page, and there's also a priest that is mentioned in the Fervor's cookbook, who wants to become a finger maiden. I might be wrong about the Fervor.
I
Is
think
it
it's
from
the
Fervor?
missionaries cookbook.
The missionary. You're right. You're right. The missionary.
Hmm.
Um, so there's like this repeating motif of obviously rejecting one's birthright because of all of the Ronnie stuff, and that's just like Carria 101, right? Um, but there's this gendered undertone to it that I think is insanely cool, and uh, I hope we're going to get like another smackdown of gender fuckery at the very end of this DLC. I'm praying.
I hope so too. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, even outside of the gender fuckery, or like just going back to, I mean, it is inside of the gender fuckery actually, but just going back to your first example of Millennia, there's never a point in game where it says Millennia disavowed her birthright as a princess of the Golden Order and,
Mm-hmm.
heiress, goddess to America. But you see from everything she does, from announcing herself as the Blade of Mikola, that she has done that exact thing.
Right. It's just
Yeah.
like one step away from being put into writing, and now
Hmm.
we're inching even closer to that. And so, well, now I would say it's pretty much in writing. Once it's in a remembrance, it's like that's canon, baby. That's main shit.
Yeah, the implicit becomes the explicit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really cool. And the twin moons is very interesting
Oh, it's so
in that
fascinating.
regard. It's like, are these supposed to be balls?
Maybe that's the deep lore.
Yeah.
Trans
That's my head
Renala.
canon.
One
Yep.
thing that does interest me though is she wanted to grant Mesmer the succor of the moon. And if you look at the fire
Mm-hmm.
serpent incantation that you get from one of the fire knights of Mesmer later on in the Shadow Keep, it reads, Incantation of the Fire Knights under Mesmer the Impaler's personal command. When the flame
Mm-hmm.
they received from Mesmer would not find purchase within them, the Fire Knights relied on fire incantations to honor their bond. And you have this idea, like to grant him succor. Obviously, I mentioned before, I see Mesmer as like this twisted character. Like almost like probably going to be like Rykard-esque. He was used and discarded, and he has twisted up feelings about that because how he was used left him permanently changed. Not just psychologically from the impact of, being the leader of a genocide and how that might make you hate yourself, but also
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that whatever he did to do this genocide, like that, whatever the concept of Mesmer's flame is something that he accepted as a change to himself, it would seem. Like, he accepted the flame into himself and it became the flame of Mesmer. He tried to share it with his knights, but it wouldn't
Mm.
find purchase in them. And he was, like, not even the moon, which we know to be an enchanting force based off of Renala, was able to
Mm-hmm.
give him relief from that flame, from that inner turmoil.
Mm. And it's really interesting that we see the marriage of the moon and the well, the blue and the red faction, I'll say, because I don't want to call it the moon and the sun because we haven't fully confirmed that Mesmer is going to be sun related, but he's very sun adjacent, I would say.
I have one direction I could take that. It's a bit
Yeah.
early, but this is one of my supreme feelings of vindication. I
Okay, hell
I have
yeah.
long been a proponent of the simple reading of Elden Ring, the Occam's Razor reading. Um,
Hmm.
like people love the Great Tree theory, people love making the Crucible complicated, and I respect that. But
Hmm.
I also think that sometimes in trying to mystify or make a mystery to uncover, make a puzzle box to open, you ignore the forest and look at the trees. You have to see the entire encompassing idea, and in that way, you see the Erdtree. and you see the Giant's Flame, and the Giant's Flame being reignited burns the Erdtree. The Erdtree grew from the Crucible. If the Crucible is just a flame, as is implied, and the Giant's Flame is in a Crucible, then perhaps the Giant's Flame was the Crucible. And if this is the case, then the act of taking a flame inside of yourself is something we already see with the Giants. And if that's something that Mesmer is imitating, then we see this idea. I think it's further confirmation of all of this. And the item that really gets me is the Furnace Visage. Have you found this item? I imagine.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so the Furnace Visage reads, a smaller imitation of the Furnace Golem's visage. A stone mask surrounded by curling horns, depicting the fell god of fire that haunts the sagas of the Horn Scent. And that is such a loaded description.
Right. Because why is he haunting it?
Uh-huh. And
why don't they like him?
yeah, it's if you take it deeper, the Furnace Visage is the face on top of the Wickerman. Have you noticed that? And the Wickerman, their knee pads are fire giant faces.
Right, they're killing fire giants as far as I can tell.
Yeah, but they're also like the fire giant. Like in the same way that the golems that served Farum Azula, they operate through this furnace core. They operate by using the fires of life in an imitation of life. And the Wickermen do the same thing. They amalgamate the life of these people that are burning inside of them to become their own life. And yeah, you see that fire of life. You see that crucible idea. So if we have this further link, if we have this fell god of fire, and the fell god of fire is something that haunts the sagas of the Horn Scent, then you not only see the fell god as like something that can be a bad influence, but you also see like, I don't know, to me what this is tying in is tying the Omen, who are the evolution of the Horn Scent, to the idea of the Crucible and divinity in a much more explicit way than what we've seen before. And it further ties all of these ideas to the Fell God, which further reinforces the connection between the Crucible and the Fell God. Of course, we have yet to find more about this. We have yet to dig as deeply into this. So my vindication could be incorrect. This line of speculation could be bunk. But it's been coloring all of my ideas of the DLC so far.
Okay, can you state what your where the theory comes in? I just want to hear you like reword it like, as it for me again, because my little ADD brain isn't absorbing it properly.
Okay, you're valid. I've been rambling, and this will probably help the viewers too. Okay, so what we learn in the base game of Elden Ring is that the Erdtree grew out of the Crucible, and the Crucible was the previous idea of the Erdtree in the prehistory. We learn that the Elden Ring represents the Erdtree, and that if this analog is to be believed, then the Elden Ring of the prehistory, whatever form it took, whatever god it had, its vision of the world was the Crucible, you know?
Okay.
We see this idea that the Horn Scent, as people of the divine, of the Crucible, you know, we see the Crucible, not talisman, describing like the misbegotten and omen symbols as symbols of the divine in the prehistory. We see this connection of like divinity to the symptoms of the Crucible, you know, the aspects of it. And in that way, we can tie Bellarat as the divine tower and center of worship in the prehistory to the idea of the Crucible, to the idea of the ruling power of the prehistory. And we see that in stealing power from the prehistory and like taking over and becoming the one true goddess, Marika decides to make one final choice and just completely obliterate the remnants of the old religion, of the old the idea of the divinity of the Horn Scent ended with Bellarat, and afterwards the Omen were just entirely vilified to the point where people forgot Bellarat ever existed outside of the Lands of Shadow.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm down. I'm in.
Okay.
On that one. I have two things. I have one side note to make about this furnace visage, which is that you speak of this denoting true divinity, right? Um, I think it's really interesting that these horns, they have little swirls like near the head. First of all, it kind of looks like the golems that we see in the DLC, the new golems that have like those little swirl lion heads going on.
Yeah, like the ones from the ruined forge.
Yeah, yeah. So we get
Mm-hmm.
all the lion stuff and Godfrey's likely culture that he came from. That's cool. That's sweet.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it really interesting that this is like it looks like a woman's face, and this motif that it's in with like swirls surrounding the head is so similar to Saint Trina's torch. She
Oh, the
like the
cyclopean hair look.
right, yeah, and it's also very like Medusa-ish,
Mm-hmm.
which is like I don't know what to make of the Medusa angle of it all, but I was like kind of surprised to see it coming back in a couple different random ways in this DLC, and I wonder if there is more to Saint Trina than just being an identity of Miquella's. Like, is she more primal than Miquella himself?
And
Um,
what we learn from our interaction with her is that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you haven't finished the Putrescence Night, so I don't want to speak too clearly of it, but we do know
yeah.
that she is an aspect of Mikola that when it came into conflict with
Mm,
his goals, it split
right.
off. He abandoned it. And
Oh my
Saint
God.
Trina is
Speaking,
personified as his doubt. That's the
yes,
conflict.
yes. And then so I haven't beat the Putrescence tonight, true, but there is the one uh footfall of Miquella before there that says this is where I abandon my love. Which,
Yeah.
speaking of gender fuckery, that's really interesting to say that your feminine adult form is representative of your love, and that's what you're abandoning down here.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, mm, that sounds pretty trans to me, homie.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm like,
definitely gender
"Ooh."
fucky.
Yeah, it's very. I'm very interested. I think that may be who I need to focus on. But there's also another really cool boss that I am keeping from you.
I cannot
Yeah,
wait. I'm so excited.
yeah, it's very cool. Okay, so then my other one I wanted to bring up was actually jumping backwards to
Okay.
Rellana real quick because I didn't get to this part. Let me just find her. Okay, so I wanted to bring up the Twin Moons again
Mm-hmm.
because it has really interesting wording. Twin Moon Night associated with a carrion princess, we know that. In her childhood, she and her elder sister Renala met these moons. First of all, confirming that there's two moons. Pretty interesting. Overlapping. Oh, wait, this isn't the one. Oh, this isn't the one.
Is
Okay,
it the
okay,
Rellana's
cancel
twin
this.
moon spell? In her childhood, she and her elder
Yes.
sister met these moon. Oh, no, that's the same one you were just reading. Ah!
Overlapping as though nestled against one another. That one's just great. That one's just cool and like affectionate and cool. And it reminds
Mm-hmm.
me of the jellyfish, but I'm actually looking for the talisman that comes from the same remembrance. So give me one tiny second.
You are valid. You are valid.
Thank
Is
you.
it, it's Rellana's cameo that drops from Moonthil, the Carrion Knight, I believe, which reads Talisman featuring a gallant portrait of Rellana, the Twin
You
Moon
got
Knight,
it.
engraved as a reminder of the unparalleled devotion of those who left their homelands to serve Rellana. By your leave, we will accompany you wherever your lunar vessel takes you. Lunar vessel is such a fascinating term, and I could speculate, but I have no reasonable clue as to what that means. Like lunar
Yeah.
vessel, is that her body? Is her body a lunar vessel for the power of the full moon? Is that something that
Yeah.
her and Renala were given power from? I don't know.
I think it's referring to her fate in this particular case.
Like the path of stars that we learn about with the
Mm-hmm.
demi-humans and with the Carrie and Ymir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I must admit, this is not the item I was looking for. Dang it. Okay, well, I'm glad we mentioned that one because it's super interesting. I love this. I
Mm-hmm.
love this item, and I love how I must say the icons are like one of the highlights of the DLC. For when I saw the enraged divine beast icon, I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. It's the one that you get from the dancing lion and erases potency of storms. It just looks so nice. This big smiling like devil faced lion.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we
Um,
talk a little bit about the dancing divine beast, or however
Absolutely.
you say it? Which is just so fascinating. Like, okay, let's just fully unpack Bellarat. Besides the Crucible Fell God connection I was talking about before, we get basically confirmation about how the horn scent represent divinity. We see the omen as, you know, they have the horns of the horn scent, but it's seen as evil. The omen are haunted by cursed spirits now as well. Um, but like beyond the horn scent, which are like humans born with the symbol of divinity, we have like divinity itself, I guess, which is worshipped there. And oh man, I don't even know where to begin with it. I guess
Hmm.
one of the biggest things to me is that the dancing lion, it moves through multiple phases during its fight. It starts with just regular dancing, but it turns into a storm, with lightning and thunder, and then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes, a winter sort of frost thing, and then it becomes
Yep.
wind. And I think in that way you can see the progression of the seasons. And this is so interesting when opposed to America's eternal permanent golden order of summer, because you
Yes.
see you see not only a lack of rejection like what the golden order has, but like the active celebration of change in the old prehistory's culture, which I think it's just the biggest difference to consider. Yeah.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that. I think there's a lot of new items that hint at this, but clearly this like pagan coded, I'll say, society. And obviously pagan coded is kind of a light word because there's like a lot of Chinese symbolism in this dancing lion itself. And there's lots of samurai swords running around all over this DLC.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's like I say pagan very, very loosely here. But regardless, the joining force of all of these cultures that are likely tied together because they're all found here in the land of shadow, uh, is that they respect the seasons. And you know who it reminds me of? My absolute favorite spot in the base game, the Dominula Village Women. And
Mm-hmm.
they are doing what could be described as like a summer solstice type celebration. So even though it's, oh, I guess it is explicit. They said they're doing a celebration, right? And there's lots of celebrating going on here, and that's what the dancing lion is for in real life. They're for like Chinese uh celebrations.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, like that's their joining force. You said it perfectly that they respect the changing of the seasons and likely respect death along with that as a part of the renewal of life, unlike America. And like that's like the center of what Elden Ring is all about is America rejecting parts of herself, especially when they have to do with time.
I really love that you brought up Dominula, because there's actually an
Hmm.
explicit connection to it in the text in the Festive Greece item.
Yes,
The
I
the
was
fest
hoping you'd go there.
Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
Festive Greece item mimics a very unique attribute that the Dominula women's weapons have, which is that they
Hmm.
increase the runes gained upon killing someone.
Yep.
And the Festive Grease reads solidified knot grease made from a mixture of bone shards. The delightful festival is an old tradition, one old enough for the Erdtree to tacitly tolerate its endurance. And this gives us a lot of explanation. First of all,
Yep.
we know that the Dominula women have most likely learned whatever, like they either revived this themselves through like cultural patterns that they had, or they learned and accepted it from the Godskin apostle who taught it to them.
Can I pause you? Can I pause you for 1 second?
Please do, please do.
So, my theory about the Dominula women is that they are Newman, and that they
Mm.
are like the oldest Newman, and they're literally living out their retirement in this place. Because if you think of Dominula Village, it is right outside the ramparts for the capital city, and it is the best farmland in the lands between, bar none. Like, it's not even close. They actually have like fields and stuff, you know? Like, this is like, as far as I'm concerned, in the lands between, if they weren't blood crazed and they like shit hadn't gone awry, that is the lap of luxury.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm imagining who's gonna get the lap of luxury spot next to America, but also safe and also get to do their old rituals, even though they're kind of not Christian, they're not really supposed to do those anymore. Who's gonna get away with that? It's the Newmans who like know what she did.
Yeah.
It's the Newman women who have like dirt on her. So that's how I think they learned it. But continue on where you were.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very reasonable too. Like, I love it. Like that line of speculation. Like, I love that Elden Ring gives you the opportunity to accept or reject any of these lines of
Right.
speculation. But yeah, I guess just going forward, it just explains and elaborates in a way that the DLC does about everything, from macro to micro. Like
Hmm.
why are the Dominula women killing people besides for the Godskin Apostle? Well, that's how you make the festive greets. It's made from bone shards, you know? Like, you have this sort of macabre element to the festivity that's just woven into it. And I think
Hmm.
that macabre nature of the prehistory is one of the most fascinating parts of it. Like, the From Software had every opportunity to completely villainize the Golden Order. Everyone that's
Hmm.
played the game is willing to accept that, but they did it one step further, and I really like the nuance of it because like people have a good reason for following the Golden Order. Like, maybe it's good intentions gone awry in a lot of
Hmm.
cases. Like the old festivals of the world were macabre. They sacrificed people. That's a shitty and tough thing to do. Like, Bellarat was
Hmm.
not immune to doing bad things. The people that were born with omen horns back then, they might have been accepted as divine and not shunned, but there's the Omen Baron item that you get that actually does the affinity spell from the older games. And that
Hmm.
reads, it reads, The Horned Baron, Dowl of a Tangle-Horden Baron. Baron means it's something to memorialize death. The other Omen Barons, the Regal and Basic, have it too.
Oh,
Um,
right. Okay.
but it basically reads, Tangled horns are a symbol of spirituality, but most young born bearing the oversized horns meet a frightfully early demise. These fetishes are made to memorialize them. In Belarus, we see people that have these tangle horns. They're big people. They look like the pygmy knights from Ring the City, where they're like these really tall figures that are imposing and extremely aggressive and strong. And like that's how they are if they live to adulthood, but many of them don't. And I think that that macabre nature, that divinity can also be bad, that like the crucible is powerful but also painful. I think that's so
Hmm.
core to the prehistory, that like, like strength is the rule of beasts, it's sort of
Right.
that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's easy to forget, right? Because like we're coming into this being like, these are the good guys.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Good
Because
point.
like Godfrey's worldview, strength is like strength befits a crown. That's
Right.
informed, like, by his conquest for the Golden Order, but also by the fact that he grew up in the prehistory. Like, the reverence of storms that Belarus has, most likely because Farum Azula was the royal city and that's where Placidusax the Storm Lord lives, that reverence of storms is integral to Godfrey's culture as Horalu before he joined the Golden Order. Like, if you look at Nephili or the Banished Knights that followed him most closely, they all use wind attacks. They're all storm based.
Right.
And that was Godfrey before he was Godfrey. That was Horalu. You know, like he
Right.
was part of this
Mm-hmm.
order and he was the strongest of them, and that's why he was chosen by the Golden Order.
Another note about the Dancing Lion in particular is that like that's Horalu's storm spells are supposed to have frost and lightning in them, but you don't really find any of Godfrey's knights, the banished knights, aren't using frost and lightning. They just have storm spells. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think it's really just wind attacks for the most
Yeah,
part.
yeah, they
Nephili
just
has
have wind
lightning,
and
but that's a
okay. Oh, okay, that's really interesting because she's got more of a direct connection to this past
mm-hmm.
culture than anybody else we see in game, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, so I just thought that was really interesting that like these the lightning was like taken out of the religious context for the storm, and the storm obviously kind of got deleted in general, but it still appears a lot. But even more so, like these other symbols were like purposefully excised from it, so to speak.
Yeah, I like the word
And
excise because that's what they did to the actual Omen horns too during the
yeah,
Golden Order.
got Elden Ring on the brain, baby. Yeah, so I think, and we've said this a couple times, I'll say it again. Uh, it's very similar to what Christianity and Judaism literally did to the religions that they were replacing.
Mm-hmm.
They just like took one aspect of the god that they liked and kept that one, and then like just kind of discarded the rest and bred
Mm-hmm.
it out, so to speak.
Yeah. And like, it's always one of those things when you look at historical cultural interplay, like it's so complicated to say who took what from whom because
Right.
it's an active dialogue. It's an exchange that goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you know, it, like
Very
it's
muddy.
yeah, like like you can't just look at modern day Christianity and how it might feel oppressively unaccepting and say that and assume that from the get-go that was their end goal. Like you have to see it as the current day Christianity is a canon that arose from many, many different faiths and over time became monolithically oppressive of other, like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's so cool. Well, not cool about the history. I mean, it is interesting, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree. It's very interesting to like actually try to watch videos and unpack that stuff. I mean, you need someone a little bit smarter to actually walk you through it than us, of course. But I do watch a lot of videos from like really smart people, and there is a way to decouple that stuff, but it's way more nuanced than just like, hey, Easter. Easter
yeah.
exists.
And I mean, me and Trina have talked about this before, but like for those of
Mhm.
you listening in, some of the best channels on YouTube, in my opinion, especially for
Mhm.
this kind of religious that stuff that we're talking about, there's Esoterica, there's
Yeah.
Religion for Breakfast, there's Let's
Mhm.
Talk Religion. I'll link
Mhm.
these below, but like they're really incredible, like just products on YouTube, completely for free, and they're made by accredited professors or people in academia that have studied this stuff, and it's really good content. Fully
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I would have nearly the grasp on Elden Ring now that I have without Esoterica.
hmm
Easily.
So, okay, we're an hour and 20 minutes in almost. So I think let's do some narrative things. I
Okay.
I mentioned the Belarus jail boss. There's a guy down there. I think you missed that mini dungeon. It's
Hmm.
pretty early in the gravesite plane, and there's a certain revelation about the lore that I don't have to bring
Hmm.
up unless you would like to hear about it.
No, I think let's go in on that one. It's a side dungeon, so.
Okay, so in the Belarus jail, which is this jail that has a bunch of horrific, pots, jars going in. People were being
Ah,
forcefully put into jars. Like in Elden Ring's base game, there is a sort of horrific element to it because you're like, damn, these people are being buried in jars. Like,
yeah.
is this something
Mm-hmm.
that they consented to? What was the cultural view on this?
Mm-hmm.
And even if it is a positive cultural view in the context of the Golden Order, if they like adapted their ways going forward, it began in a dark way. You see like prisoners being forcefully put in pots, and you also see the failure of these pots to become great jars, and you see like the amalgamation of human flesh that comes out of it. It's an enemy type that's recurring throughout the DLC. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but going to the bottom of the Belarus jail, you find a person named Demi-Human Swordmaster Anze.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a goblin swordmaster who kicks your shit in. He is so fast and really aggressive and heal punishes like a madman.
Cool.
Yeah. But like one of the biggest revelations of him is that he knows like sorcery. He knows magic, you know?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's an ash of war that he drops, and then later on you get the sword that he wields. So I'll begin with the ash of war that he drops, which is demi-human swordsman Yosh. Not swordsmaster, just a swordsman. Um
Oh, okay, so it's not him. It's like one of his cohorts.
yeah, something like that. It's
Okay.
like, how Electo will drop Tish type of
Yep.
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So this reads: used to summon the spirit of Yosh, the demi-human swordsman. Anze, a master swordsman who devoted himself to the star-lined sword, realized that only ruin awaited at the end of the procession of stars, and imprisoned himself in order to forestall it. However, Yosh, an apprentice who absorbed his technique, stubbornly refused to heed his master's words, and spent entire his life at his side, in defiance of his self-imposed seclusion. That's a lot to unpack, isn't it?
Wait, what? Okay, so
Uh-huh.
wait. How does staying next to this guy's side like help you accomplish that goal, buddy?
That I don't even know. I don't even know how to unpack the second paragraph about what Yosh wanted to do.
Right.
Yosh is really funny because that's just like yes in Japanese. Like if you play Sonic Adventure 2 and you jump with Eggman, he says Yosh because he's like yes. Like
Oh, okay.
yeah. Um but yeah, it references the Starline the Sword, which let me find that real quick.
Okay,
The,
okay.
the Starline the Sword reads: sword encrusted with a line of stars fashioned from small pieces of crude glintstone, weapon of the demi-human swordsman. When bestowed with this weapon by their queen, the swordsmen swear to find the truth that lies at the end of the procession of stars. What do you think of the
Damn.
procession of stars? Because that's a really loaded phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, the procession of stars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right away, if oh my God. That
It's a
you just hit me
lot.
with a thinker.
Lore alert.
Yeah, lore alert. I need to like
Sit
I'm gonna
down
need to
about that one.
yeah, I'm gonna need to sit with that one.
Do you want to hear my thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, already, this is getting you to think of like the Carians, the astrologers, the
Right.
stars as a path of
Maggie.
fate. Uh huh. Um, and you have, like Ronnie cannot complete her fate until, she unlocks the stars from Radon. Later on, when you meet Ymir, the carrier bro, as you describe him,
Mm-hmm.
he gives you a key item. Let me see if I still have that key item, because that might
Mm-hmm.
that'll be important to read as well. Yeah, he gives you the whole laden necklace. A pale blue necklace made from a
Oh,
thin, elongated stone hollowed out from the inside. Used at the hallowed ruin to sound the hanging bell. It was a teaching of Count Ymir. The fate of one who sounds the hanging bell will be guided by the stars. You know, you have this
okay.
idea of Caria and the stars, and I think that the fact that the demi-human swordsmen use magical slashing attacks with their, like, these are the same stars that they're looking at, even if they might have different understandings of what the fate of stars means. Like, it sounds like the demi-humans view of, like, the procession of stars, that sounds, again, pagan in a way, like very spiritualist, as opposed to the more academically oriented Carian understanding of stars. But even then, it's the same idea of fate being guided by the stars. And
Whoa.
when you extrapolate that to Anze, who saw that only ruin lay at the end of the procession of stars,
Yeah.
you see the Golden Order. The gold that commandeth the very stars is literally one of the first lines from Godfrey and one of the earliest trailers of Elden Ring.
Yep.
Like, if the prehistory was ruled by, like, a starry night fate, then you have this idea of the greater will sending its golden star and blotting out, the fates of many to
Yep.
become the fate of one. It's something we knew in the base game, but once again we see so much extrapolation, so many specifics to then further understand this from. Yeah, I don't know, it's just
Wow.
really interesting.
Okay. Okay, so let's start easy. So the stars are representative of fate itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when America in the trailer is grabbing that golden thread out of the goddessy, uh to me that's for grabbing the threads of fate. And so I think that's very similar, if not the same event, to when the Elden Star comes down
Mm-hmm.
and creates this new mega fate, so to speak, that can like speak louder than the stars. That's like man ascending sort of to godhood to control their own fate. Um, that's really interesting. But if man is in control of their own fate, uh, then they can also crash and burn, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know if the ruin is that ruin that they're talking about, or there's some separate ruin that would just happen naturally if the stars were left to their devices. Um, but let's say that's the ruin they saw. Um, then maybe it is kind of like destiny, so to speak, that America would happen because I am imagining um this procession of stars. It's called a procession, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think you've seen this, but in the ruins, there are like herds of fingers. You know the
The
finger?
finger crawlers.
Yeah, there's like
Mm-hmm.
literal herds of them. So to me, the fact that they're making the fingers like much more mystical and much more Archtree-ish, to use a Dark Souls 1 term, I think this description and the demi-humans themselves are trying to do an as above, so below with the fingers and the roots versus the stars. So like if
Mm-hmm.
the fingers are being a procession when they're in those herding migrations and like they're all kind of like converging on these ruins that have like a spirally nature to them in the middle, um that's maybe like supposed to be representative of the different fates that can happen to the world, so to speak, but they all coalesce. So why do they all coalesce? Perhaps because this was always fated. And the
Mm-hmm.
ruin that everybody keeps seeing is like literally just America's ruin. And they're just like seeing her fuck it up over and over again. Um, because that was always going to happen because of this momentous godly event where the greater will seems to have like kind of taken matters into their own hands, just so to speak, and chosen someone to ascend to this higher plane and have control of fate in the first place, and like give man the power to change that course. But like the flow of time is gonna work the same anyway.
I think the greater will taking matters into its own hands is like the best way to think of the rise of the Golden Order. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
something that you could have said even back in just the base game, but again is more explicit now.
Mm-hmm.
Although we have yet to learn more about the greater will. At least I have yet to find a bunch of item descriptions going too
Yeah.
deeply into it or the fingers. So I'm very excited about learning more about that. But like
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's this idea of like if the greater will came to the lands between, if it had power in a way before, like Ymir says that the sorceries are also children of the greater will. I think that's really important.
Classic Demon Souls.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. And you see that in fundamentalism. It's so good. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Like the founding Reign of Stars was such an impactful spell
Yes.
because it references that during a meteor shower, both Glintstone and Amber came to the lands between. Like,
Yep.
and that's actually okay. I have two things that I wanted to bring up based off of your spiel. The
Yes.
first one is that there's a Finger Weaver's cookbook. Did you find that at all in the first ruin?
Oh, I might have, but I don't remember.
Okay, it gives
Uh,
further explicit stuff for the creepy crawlies. It says a record of crafting techniques left by a determined student of the Finger Ruins. His brush with the sublime all but shattered his mind, though he was left capable enough to leave these few precious words.
oh, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That one's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's super fascinating because it basically confirms that the creepy crawlies are connected to the fingers. You know, like the creepy crawly finger hands that you find in,
Yep.
the Carrion Manor or the mountaintops. Those are connected to the fingers, the 2 and 5 fingers, like we, you know.
And it also confirms that it's not just a Carrion invention.
Yes, that is so important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Um, we know from the we know from the we know from the map fragments, I think, let me check that, that the
Mm-hmm.
fingers in the finger ruin that we find are actively growing, which is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Bringing up the mushroom stuff.
Mm-hmm. Um, and it makes it so that like it's likely that the whatever the that the finger guys, the creepy crawlies, are also growing from all of this. Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's good shit. I'm
So
trying to find a account though. So yeah, yeah. Give you a piece. Give you a piece.
we often see the fingers like burrowed into the ground, right?
Yeah, we
And
do.
fingers in general, they're usually pointed up at the sky. So that's kind of why I'm imagining them as like the so below version of the stars, because they're kind of like fate related beings, but
Mm-hmm.
they're like the things that grasp up at the stars.
Yeah.
They're like almost like our, and I'm saying like man and human a lot, but obviously that doesn't quite work for Elden Ring, but I just mean like humanoid beings in general. When they're grasping at their fate, they're like reaching at the stars, like they're trying to touch the stars.
Yeah, like
Um,
Full Metal Alchemist does it in their intros. It's a
oh,
grasping
duh,
at higher
yeah,
potential.
yeah. Oh my God, when he does like the like super anime grasp at the end. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think they lean
Yeah.
on Full Metal Alchemist a lot more than other lore theorists believe. So yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up.
One thing I do want to say, you were talking about like the ruin of the procession of stars, and we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about the ruined forges earlier. And the first ruined forge I found is the ruined forge of Starfall Past, which
Oh, I didn't
is
see that one, I don't think. That's cool.
that's isn't that a fascinating name? Starfall
Yeah.
Past. Inside of the forge, you find several golden rocks that look very similar to the meteorite that's embedded in the Divine Towers.
Oh, dang. Okay, Founding
Uh-huh.
Reign of Stars, very much.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so like you
Okay.
get this idea of the greater will comes to the lands between on a golden star. There's these ruined forges that are built to craft with like this new meteorite. We learn literally that smithing starts with the Golden Order, smithing and writing, because the ancestor followers eschew the Golden Order. Something I forgot to mention earlier with Belarus is that Belarus confirms the architecture of what the ancestor followers worship. The ancestors that they're following is Belarus. They're following the old ways before the prehistory. And
Hmm. Okay.
like if these ways changed after the construction of the divine towers and the coming of the greater will, I you see the ruined forge as the direct line, like crossing point into this era. You see them
Hmm.
literally develop smithing. The misbegotten, who are associated along with the fire giants with the foundations of smithing because they're associated with the crucible, are found in the ruined forge of Starfall Past. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. That's where my mind goes with these new lore
Mm-hmm.
revelations. Again, I could be
Mm-hmm.
wrong. I really like to record this because it's like it's for my own posterity.
Oh,
Like it's
absolutely.
interesting to see how theories evolve.
I'm doing the same thing. So I did, like I said, I did like a 3 hour rant. Just like vomiting all of my craziest theories.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like super excited to get done with this DLC so I can go back and be like, all right, Trina got this part wrong, but Vindication City right over here, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be fun. So I
Yeah.
definitely like doing this. It's a very good time.
Yeah, and I know it's. I think this is a good time to be wrapping up. I'd like to finish out the
Okay.
Finger Valley discussion with the
Mm-hmm.
the cut off finger weapon you can get in the base game. It reads
Mm-hmm.
bludgeon made of an enormous finger sheathed in several heavy rings, thought to have been cut from an ancestor, keyword ancestor, of the finger creeper, the creepy crawly guys.
Right.
Some life yet remains in this legacy of an ancient act of blasphemy, as evidenced by the barely perceptible warmth it still exudes. Warmth is associated with lively vigor, with fire, with crucible energies.
Mm-hmm.
Blasphemy is blaspheming against the divine tower of Ballarat. The creation of the holy golden order was done through blaspheming against the divine. And I think there's a sort of almost combat between holiness as defined by the golden order and divinity as defined by like true divinity. I'm
Mm.
not sure. I don't know. I think that's something that's also yet to be discovered. But I say this as my own wrap up of the Finger Valley ruins. I want to hear all of your thoughts about that and anything else you want to touch on before we get to the end.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think forging, if we're talking, we might as well make some guesses here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think forging might be really similar to gravity magic, and I know that's maybe a bit of a stretch when I first say it, but so gravity magic is like controlling the fates of the stars, and that's kind of one of our vectors for acting as the gods do, so to speak. But another way we can act as the gods do is what the Noxian people do, and and a lot of different cultures have their own version of this. But that's like creating a body and creating life. And creating life is like absolutely supposed to be a godly thing. And so we used to think that the blasphemous thing being mentioned in that finger creeper finger, the cut off finger, was referring to the blasphemous blade and or no. Just the right card in general, not the Blasphemous Blade. Or is it? It might be. Anyway.
Yeah,
Uh,
people wanted to assume that the Finger
right.
Creepers were purely just Rykard and not
Right.
something else, something deeper. You
Right.
know, I think that sort of goes back to I don't know. I think that the lore community sort of tangled itself up in knots over Elden Ring a little bit. You know, people didn't want
Sure.
to like so clearly say someone's wrong. People made declarations about things, and I think that's sort of beautiful. I mean, that's totally almost intended as a thing
Absolutely.
that they wanted, but yeah, I think it's sort of interesting to consider.
Yeah. So I think that smithing may turn out to be similarly uh, a godly act for a human to do, so to speak, in that you're able to manipulate gold and silver. It seems that
Mm-hmm.
like gold and silver are kind of like the main life energies that make up a body, and then I would say on top of that, it's a blood is like a close third.
Okay.
So the fact that they're able to uh, smith in this era, and that's kind of like one of the major technical advances that seem to be on display in this culture. I think that may be um, related to whatever blasphemous act went on here that has to do with the fingers themselves. Because imagine you're trying to make new beings that don't have a bunch of horns. Maybe you would need special godly material to make those beings, and maybe they were like chopping up fingers to
Mm.
make fated beings that or non-fated beings if they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
separate them from the stars that originally guided them.
Or separate the crucible from the natural golden light of the
Yes,
greater will. Like
or
we
that.
see that in the natural continuation. Ymir has literal dialogue where he speaks of Marika and the Erdtree as imperfect. And if they're imperfect because of the natural separation of the three fingers and the two fingers, then we also see this ancient act of blasphemy as the mistake that the greater will made. You know, like it thought that it could contain away the fell god. I mentioned the fell god before as something that was specifically has been connected to the horn sense, and you know the greater will thinks it can restrain this power, but all it does is break things forever. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
until Mikola can atone for it, or until things can be figured out, what
Mm-hmm.
salvation can be found.
Omniscient time traveling Mikola. He's coming more and more real every day.
Ooh. Okay, are there any other theories and ideas you want to get out there?
Yes, I wanted to do one more.
Okay, okay. Hit me
This
with it.
is this is Vindication City for someone else. A friend of ours, a human Justicar. I remember you, baby. She was saying from the very start that she thinks that Mikola purposefully got abducted. And if you've been to the storehouse and you talk to the person in the back of the storehouse, he's basically going to explain exactly that. And now they've done like a switcheroo and someone has absconded. They literally even used the same word, absconded with Moog's body. So he confirms that like Mikola kind of faked it and
He
got
was
abducted on
intentionally
purpose.
kidnapped, yeah.
Yeah, intentionally kidnapped. And a human Justicar was saying that back in the day, and everybody was trying to poo poo her on it, and we're like, no, that's too easy. But like the truth is, the signs were there.
They were! They
Absolutely, the
were
signs
all
were there.
there. I have been
Yeah,
right there with her the entire time.
yeah,
I
exactly. They
I
were all
don't
there,
mind
and we just didn't want to hear it.
yeah. No, that's what I'm talking about with the tangled up in knots thing. People
Yes,
deserve their
yes,
vindication, and
yes.
I think it's good proof. Honestly, I think it's a learning moment. You know, I think that people should be able to have reasonable conversations about things, and I
Right.
think that like, you know, back in the day when people, you know, not I included got fucking shit for this, but like people were like, I don't like the connotation that Mikola chose that for himself, and that's a gross and
Yeah,
dirty connotation to
it's
grapple with.
your
But
thing to grapple with, though, not Nicola's.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like just because you don't like the subtext of what something is implied, that doesn't mean it's not true.
Right.
Celivis is a rapist.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
you know, we
Yeah,
we make
clearly.
yeah, we make jokes about being a dolly botherer and a creep, but if we're gonna explicitly say what's going on,
Right.
Celivis is a rapist. He's a date
Yeah.
rapist. Like,
Yeah.
there's gross things in Elden Ring to contend with. Just because you don't
Hmm.
like the connotation that, yeah,
Especially when it comes to fate. If you're bringing the word fate up in that context, I think it gets extra muddy for people because nobody wants to believe that they would be fated to be a victim, which I am not a proponent of either.
no, me neither. I mean,
Yeah. So
we all bring
anytime
our
you're
own
bringing up
baggage.
that word fate, it's like, it adds extra baggage, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, to end on a happier note, let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about the core narrative and our expectations. Mikola
Mm-hmm.
wants you to burn the Skadu tree, just like how you burned the
Yeah.
Erdtree. If the Skadu tree, which is described as the umbral tree, umbral meaning the dark side of the moon, which means again the as above, so below, the umbral tree cannot exist without the actual tree.
Yep.
I don't. I think it not only implies that the Skadu tree may not even be a great tree. I think, I want to see the great tree theory disproved. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I'm a
Mm-hmm.
hater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, I like to think that maybe Mikola is finishing what the Tarnished started with burning the Erd tree, and is like, I don't know.
Yep. Burning the roots. That's
Yep.
what I think is going on. I think this is literally the roots of the Erdtree. I've described this to you in different types of ways in the past, but I'll say it very clearly. I think that we are in the South Pole when we come here. And I'm really, really, really disappointed that we didn't get a cutscene after we touched Makela's arm. Because I really wanted there to be like some symbolic like character death Dark Souls 2 moment where like
Have you
we fall
noticed
into
how?
like a whirlpool or something.
Yeah. Have you noticed how when you look off the side of the map, like off the cliff, it looks a bit fucky? Like it's like foggy mist. It's not always like an ocean or sea like in the lands between.
Oh, hell yeah. Edge of the earth type shit.
Yeah, like if you go to the Cerulean coast, you get water on the edge. So it's
Right.
not all there, but in
Right.
certain cases you just like sort of look into a chasm and you see roots and stuff rather than
Oh, yes,
water.
I actually did see that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think that is literally the same roots that we see in the nameless Eternal City.
Okay. Yeah, that's
So
why I was
I think
bringing it up.
that's
I
the
was,
core of
yeah.
the earth, and you're seeing like the point where the lands between and the Skadu Valley meet when you're seeing those roots
Yeah.
in the center of the earth. So
It's
yeah,
fascinating stuff.
yeah, that's where I think it's going.
Hmm.
Pray for me.
I shall, I shall. Okay, okay, okay. Thank you so much for joining. I would love to do another episode
Yeah,
again in the
absolutely,
future.
for sure.
Where can people find your content?
Yes, you can find me everywhere at Saint Trina plus the thing I'm doing, Saint Trina Live on Twitch, Saint Trina Lore on YouTube, and more importantly, Saint Trina Game Dev. All one. These are all one word. Saint Trina Game Dev over on Instagram. Please come check out our game Hysteria. We're gonna have an alpha this sometime this year. I have no idea what time this year because we're just working our little tushies off. And it's gonna be a 3D witchy RPG, and it's gonna have a lot of mystery and yeah, some similar symbolism to Elden Ring. We're clearly going to like take uh take care to steer clear of some of the same symbolism so we can say our own new story. But yeah, if you like that type of shit, please come check us out.
Yeah, you will find links to all of that below. Definitely check out Hysteria, especially. It is a fantastic, it's a very interesting and cool project.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, And thank you to the viewer for watching and listening to this long. I can't wait to put out more content and refine these theories. And
Hmm.
like, please, if you disagree, if you want to see the Great Tree theory proven right, if you want to see a connection that's not the Fell God to the Crucible, if you want to see anything, please disagree, share your thoughts, share your speculation. This is time to do it. This is everything's up in the air. The things are yet to be decided, yet to be learned. And it's just this fantastic, melting pot, crucible type of situation with the community where you can see all of these lore theories coalesce and come together.
Absolutely. Like, comment, and subscribe, nerds.
Yeah, do it, nerds. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you all next time. Don't you
Thanks a lot.
dare. Yeah!
Bye.
Bye bye.